So we are just a few days away from UFC Abu Dhabi, Robert Whittaker versus Reinier De Ridder, which means you know what time it is, man. It is time for the X's and O's. In this video, I will be highlighting what I believe the game plans are going to be for both of these fighters coming into this fight and how I see this going, right? What I think their game plans should be coming into this fight, because there is no question that this is a very interesting style clash, right? And to be honest, I was surprised when this fight was booked, right? When we're talking about Robert Whittaker, we're talking about one of the greatest middleweights of all time, a guy that is still in the prime of his career at only 34 years of age. I know he's got some miles on him, but he is only in there with the best of the best in the division. He's a former champion, and he is a complete mixed martial artist. Now, he's got a very interesting challenge across from him in Reinier De Ridder, right? A guy that has made a huge splash since coming into the UFC, finishing Gerald Meerschaert, finishing Kevin Holland, and then most recently going out there and derailing the Bo Nickel hype train. So you knew going out there, beating a hyped up prospect like Bo, there was a big opportunity waiting for Reinier. I didn't think that it would be this big, a 5-round main event in the UFC. Very new territory for Reinier. Going to be interesting to see how he approaches one of the greatest middleweights of all time in the Reaper, Robert Whittaker. Super excited to break this one down, given what styles these guys bring to the table, man. Super interesting matchup. But first, let's start with the tail of the tape, right? Both guys, 34 years of age. RDR, he's going to have almost a 3-inch reach advantage over Robert Whittaker. And yes, he is a few inches taller than Robert Whittaker. And the unique thing about RDR, this guy has fought in multiple different weight classes outside the UFC, right? Over in ONE FC, he's fought at light heavyweight. I mean, this is a big dude, man, right? And that's where a lot of the antennas start to go up, right? The alarm starts to sound, meh, 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 right? Whenever Robert Whittaker fights a big physical guy that can try to impose his physicality on him, right? And that's where we've seen Robert Whittaker struggle a little bit in the past. However, that has been up against guys like Dricus Du Plessis, who is now the current champion, right? He went in these close fights with Yoel Romero. So I don't know that that's exactly the most true thing when it comes to Robert Whittaker taking on some of these challenges. But there's no question that RDR is going to be the bigger guy in there come fight night. But the experience on the side of Robert Whittaker, considering UFC experience, very favorable on the side of Robert. I think it's going to be something that he looks to utilize if this fight makes it into the later rounds. Now, let's start with the Robert Whittaker game plan, right? Because I think that this is very straightforward, man. I mean, keep the fight on the feet, right? Robert Whittaker, he is light years ahead of RDR when it comes to the striking, right? Overall, when you talk about the striking of Rob, it's built around the jab, right? We know he's got that karate style. He's bladed. He darts in and out. But one thing Rob's done a good job of later in his career here, he's kind of dialed it down to be a little bit more boxing oriented, right? We do see him bounce from time to time, but we've seen him move forward, put the pressure on guys, and look to land some of those big shots like we saw him do against Ikram Ali Scarab. So Rob is very capable of pushing the pace and moving forward, not always being the guy that is just sitting on the back foot. Now, it's going to be a little bit different in this fight, given RDR is a big guy. He's going to want to get a hold of Rob to clinch. So I think that Robert Whittaker, utilizing his elusiveness, utilizing his speed on the outside, that is clearly going to be the key for him, right? Those good straight shots down the middle, the jab, the right hand, and that beautiful high kick that he hides behind the right hand. Going to be maybe a little harder to land it in this fight considering how tall RDR is, but Robert Whittaker is a very flexible guy, right? And there's no question that he's one of the better strikers in this weight class, right? Utilize your speed. That's one of the things about Reinier, man. He's not the fastest guy in the world, right? He kind of just like, just kind of moseys forward, right? He'll flick a jab out there, but there's not a ton on it, right? He doesn't have a super dangerous striking game from the outside, right? Or even in mid-range, right? RDR's game is built around the clinch, right? When it comes to the striking, at least. So stick and move, right? If you have to sit on the back foot, try to gain his respect, land those shots to get RDR moving backwards, because we saw in those 2 losses for RDR. Now, granted, that was a very, big guy that he was fighting. You still saw that when RDR gets pressured, he doesn't respond very well, right? So if Rob can tag him with those shots and keep the fight on the feet moving forward, Rob is going to have a tremendous amount of success in this fight. And I have this highlighted, man. You have got to keep your back off the fence if you are Robert Whittaker, right? We know that Rob likes to kind of sit back, play that counter game where he'll kind of blitz in and out of range, where That's going to be a little tricky to do in this fight, considering that you know that De Ridder's going to try to take you down. You don't necessarily want to be blitzing into range recklessly, right? So I think that we're going to see Rob kind of pick and poke, look to set his shots up, but he's got to keep his back off the fence, right? Because that is where RDR's game is built, right? Is moving forward, utilizing his striking to enter into the clinch, push you up against the fence to where that opens up De Ridder's entire arsenal, right? Whether it's knees into the clinch, good short elbows, being able to get to the, to his judo, trip you, sweep you, throw you, take you down, and then ultimately where he is really at his best when it comes to the jiu-jitsu. So got to keep your back off the fence. Do not help Reinier De Ridder get to what he is trying to do, because that's where RDR is at his best, man. That's how he wins this fight. Backing up Robert Whittaker, trapping him, applying pressure, and keeping him pinned up against the fence. That's where RDR will have the success. Then he can use his size, his physicality, and being the guy that's fought in a heavier weight class before. That's where I think RDR is going to look to take advantage of Rob. So Rob got to keep his back off the fence. He's got to defend that single leg. Right? If you're keeping your back off the fence for Rob here, you're clearly winning the fight in my eyes. But you do have to be careful, right? Especially because RDR is a southpaw. Rob's an orthodox style fighter. That single leg is right there for De Ridder to grab, right? And he does an excellent job of this. We saw that against Kevin Holland, right? He snatched that single leg beautifully, quickly, did it against Gerald Mearshart as well. And that's a unique thing about Reinier, right? I feel like a lot of fighters nowadays, like, sure, they can push you up against the fence, utilize wall work, cage work, right, to aid into the takedowns. But RDR is one of those guys that if that fails, he can still take you down out in space, which I think is a very impressive thing. So got to be able to defend the single, but we already know Robert Whittaker has outstanding takedown defense. Do not let the Khamzat Chimaev fight fool you into thinking that Rob can't defend a takedown all of a sudden. This guy's been in there with Yoel Romero, Jacare back in the day. He even got taken down by DDP, got right back up to his feet. Rob is a very competent grappler, so I don't think that single out in space is going to be the best way for RDR to get to Robert Whittaker. Now, smart pressure, right? I mentioned this before. If you can put RDR on his back foot, one, that makes him a hell of a lot more predictable, but RDR doesn't fight while moving backward, right? It's hard to shoot a takedown when you're on the back foot. You're pressed up against the fence. Rob's pressuring you. He's trying to draw out those shots, trying to draw out those reactions. That is where we will see Rob slicing and dicing, just like he did to Ikram. Right, and I believe Rob, he's going to come in with confidence. This is a 5-round fight. RDR probably cuts a lot of weight to make this weight class. And Rob's like, listen, we go into the later rounds. I know I can go a hard 25 minutes. I've done it plenty of times. RDR, he's unproven there as far as I'm concerned, right? Especially in the UFC at least. Right, so look for Rob to weaponize that. Push the pace. Turn this into a little bit of a marathon. Right, see if you can land those straight shots down the middle. RDR doesn't have good defense at all. I will say, I do think his striking has improved a little bit since he's gotten into the UFC. But that doesn't mean that all is good now, that everything is just, clean. Everything is just, fixed on the side of RDR, right? I know that he's made some improvements, but Robert Whittaker has a significant advantage on the feet. That high kick, if he can hide it behind the right hand, I see a home for it all day. RDR does not move his head, man. He doesn't move his head at all. Those oblique shots, right? Those little side kicks to the leg, that helps prevent the pressure, helps prevent RDR from moving forward, kind of deters you from just taking those aggressive pressure steps moving forward, right? And then last but not least, be mean. Be that mean Robert Whittaker that headlined a fight night back in Abu Dhabi before, where he went out there and starched Ikram Aliskerov. Came out there with a chip on his shoulder, point to prove, young, dangerous guy in Ikram. It was a big step up for Ikram, and I know it was last minute for Ikram and Rob, for that fight there. But utilize that anger, man. Fight smart, weaponize your meanness. That, I feel like, is something that sets Robert Whittaker apart. And when he shows up that way with a point to prove, we see the best version of Robert Whittaker usually when he does that. So sticking and moving, keeping this fight on the feet, dictating the pace on his terms when it comes to the striking, and stopping the takedowns. Don't get backed up against the fence. If Robert Whittaker does that, not only will he win this fight, I believe that he will knock out Reinier De Ridder in this matchup if he implements his game plan to perfection, which I think that there is a solid chance that he could do that in this fight. This is a very good matchup for Robert Whittaker. Dangerous and tricky, but also a favorable one considering how much of an advantage he has in terms of the UFC experience and his striking on the feet. Now, let's get into RDR, right? Because I feel like this is a very fascinating guy that's came over to the UFC, right? And I was very critical of Reinier in his debut against Gerald Mearshart because, look, it was in the Apex. It wasn't like there was this big crowd here to where you're necessarily getting these huge UFC jitters, right? I know it's still in the UFC, right? So I guess you could still have them. But you were fighting for titles over in ONE FC. He's been a part of a big organization before, but we know that when you come to the UFC, it's a little bit different, right? But then he comes out against Kevin Holland, steamrolls him, goes out there and makes Bo Nickel wilt, right? So we clearly have seen this guy's developing confidence. You hear it in his interviews. You hear it, him talking. He clearly believes in himself, and he thinks that he's going to come out here, pressure Robert Whittaker, take him down, and get him out of there, right? Because Khamzat Chimaev just did it. Now, we have to point out RDR is not Khamzat, right? Khamzat is super aggressive, outstanding wrestling skills, really good jiu-jitsu, and he is all or nothing in the very beginning in terms of overwhelming you, not allowing you to get your feet going to where RDR doesn't really do that, right? We saw him do very, very well against Kevin Holland early in the fight, but he's not explosive. He doesn't have dangerous power like Khamzat Chimaev does as well. So these are two different guys. So kind of put that matchup to the side. Don't stand with Robert Whittaker. If RDR is not able to get this fight to the floor, it is as simple as he will not make it to 25 minutes. I'd be shocked if he did. If he can't get the takedowns and he's stuck on the feet with Robert Whittaker for large periods of times in this fight, Robert Whittaker is just way too advanced for De Ridder on the feet, man. Like, I know that RDR was fighting a big guy in Malkin or whatever his name was, the big Russian dude, right? Who's got good wrestling, crazy power, and sure, he looked quite a bit yoked up, so who knows what was going on there. But that guy was tagging RDR, man. And I know that Whittaker doesn't have the power of that guy, obviously. But Whittaker has better technique, better shot selection, and he does have pinpoint accuracy to where he could absolutely bust up Reinier De Ridder. So don't stand with Robert Whittaker. He has to come in with that do-or-die game plan of, I got to get this fight to the floor. And that comes with very heavy, smart pressure. You can't be reckless to where you're just running into range and getting clipped by Rob, because Rob clearly has the power to knock you out, right? I know people, well, when's the last time Robert Whittaker's knocked someone out? Well, we know he knocked out Ikram, but before that, I mean, it's been a while, right? Since we've seen Whittaker knocking anybody out, but he's been in there with some of the best guys in the world, man. Durable fighters, guys with good chins, like DDP, like an Israel Adesanya, right? Marvin Vettori. So those are some things to take into consideration. But that heavy, smart pressure, because you can't just sit on the outside and let Rob get his rhythm going. Because if you do that, Rob will start to tee off. He'll start to flow. He'll start to set up those combinations, and that's when Rob's at his best. He's got to live in the clinch, right? Bullying Rob up against the fence. Impose that physicality advantage you have over Robert Whittaker. Make him feel that. Get him in the clinch. Wear on him. Take away that speed and explosiveness. Because another thing about Rob, he does, as the fight plays out, even though he's got a great gas tank, those hands do dip a little bit lower, right? He holds his hands low to begin with, which can help defend against takedowns, but also his hands tend to get lower, which can open up some shots upstairs, right? Live in the clinch. RDR is better than Robert Whittaker in the clinch. I would say that might be the one area that RDR, to me, has is something that stands out compared to Rob. Those knees, they're devastating. Good short elbows inside. His judo, trips, sweeps, throws. That is where RDR lives, man. It's where he absolutely lives, and that's single leg in space, right? If he's not able to back Rob up, because the thing about De Ridder is he's slow. That's the reality, right? He's got kind of this clumsy move forward, kind of style, and Rob's fast. Moves around on the outside. So I don't think it's going to be very easy to get a hold of Robert Whittaker. And Rob, his goal is going to be to make De Ridder pay every time he tries to close the distance. So if you can't back him up against the fence, you can't get into the clinch, De Ridder ain't going to win this fight. But he still has the single leg, which is kind of, I don't want to say plan B, but that's his other option. But I don't see that being very easy. Bending all the way down, getting a hold of the lead leg of Robert Whittaker. And Whittaker's got great flexibility. He's very athletic. He has very good takedown defense. I think he stuffs that single all night long, man. But it's the way that De Ridder can chain it together. You start to defend, he can get to a trip. He can throw you down, and he's not afraid to pull guard because he has confidence that he can change the position, reverse, get on top, and start to work his game, right? And then when he does get into the clinch, if he gets there, knees and elbows, that's where RDR, to me, has a little bit of an advantage over Rob. Those knees that, yeah, Rob is not going to fold like Bo Nickel. Right, that's not in the picture here. But those knees add up. They take wind out of the sail. They bring your hands down. They fatigue you. They batter your body up. Right, and if you land a good one on the liver or something, that can put you out. That can drop you. Right, to where you got to cover up. And we know when you get hit in the liver, by the time you recover, the fight's stopped. Right, good short elbows and close. Make Rob pay. Cut him open. Right, careful guard play here, right? Because I know De Ridder, he likes to do this where he doesn't have a problem pulling guard, right, or ending up on bottom. He's one of those guys that doesn't mind doing that, but you got to be careful doing that because Robert Whittaker, he's mean, dude. And if we see that mean version of Whittaker, he'll posture up and start raining down some nasty ground and pound. Good punches, good elbows, and he'll try to make RDR pay. So you got to be careful doing that. Right? And that's why you hear all the, the analysts out there, careful playing guard off your back, man. Careful playing off your back in MMA. It's not the best thing to do nowadays, right? Because guys have gotten so good at throwing the ground and pound. You saw Kron Gracie against Bryce Mitchell, right? I know that that's not the best example because Kron's very one-dimensional, but you get my point. Turn this into a grappling match. Do not strike with Robert Whittaker. I mean, you're going to have to at some point to close the distance. This is MMA. This isn't flow grappling. He's going to have to close the distance, right? But when he does, turn this into a grappling match. By all means, don't stand with Robert Whittaker. He doesn't hold a candle to Rob up there. It's a complete, on a scale of 1 to 10, Robert Whittaker is between an 8 and a 10 when it comes to a striker, and RDR is somewhere between a 1 and a 5. That's the reality. So he's clearly outmatched. With the grappling, I think RDR has a little bit of an edge over Rob. But defensively, we've seen Rob is good. We've also seen offensively that Rob is pretty good, right? Impose your physicality. That is one of the big things coming into this fight that everyone's talking about is how big of a guy Reinier De Ridder is. And you saw what an awkward, kind of quirky, funky guy like DDP did. Got in his face, imposed his strength on him, right? And kind of made Rob feel that as the fight played out. That is a way to fatigue somebody as well. But the problem is RDR's gas tank's not the best. It isn't. So he's going to have to try to wear on Rob, implement his game plan, take wind out of the sail, get this fight to the floor in the half guard game. If you watch RDR, man, whenever he gets into half guard, this is a bread and butter position for him, man. He could start to let some of those elbows go, some good ground and pound. He could start to work into mount because the unique thing about RDR, a lot of guys, they got to get off to the side. They got to drive their feet out and to lock in that arm triangle, whereas RDR, he just kind of crashes down to his hip and will squeeze so he doesn't fully lose the mount position, which that's a crazy little detail. I saw Stefan Struve bringing that up on his little Fight Lab thing with Tom Aspinall. That's a great point. That's a great catch because RDR on the ground, he doesn't give away positions. Very rarely. He's very sticky when the fight hits the floor. He's going to want to use that half guard game because it gives him the option to work some submissions. We see Sean Brady play a great half guard game, right? It's a great position to utilize in MMA. You got your ground and pound. You can start to work for submissions. You can eventually work into mount. They want to score him out. You can take their back. RDR's high level when it comes to the jiu-jitsu, man. So if he smashes everything together, moves forward, takes the wind out of the sail of Robert Whittaker, and does not stand at range to where Rob can outstrike him or land those shots, RDR could have a lot of success in this fight. So ultimately, what is my pick going to be, right? I did my full card breakdown already, and I said, look, man, I think Robert Whittaker can go in here. He can outclass Reinier De Ridder. He has the UFC experience. He's a savvy guy. He's super technical, and these losses, they're to the best guys in the world. They're to guys that are champions, former champions, whatever, right? Robert Whittaker is never really in there against, he's only been fighting the best of the best. This is a big step up in competition for RDR, where this may be looked at as a step down for Robert Whittaker, because while we've seen RDR do a lot of things, he still seems a bit unproven, but you can't deny the skills of RDR, man. He brings some of the things that you could see that could trouble Robert Whittaker. He's riding momentum. He has the size. He has an outstanding ground game to where, we've said before, he is not Khamzat Chimaev. But when he does get the fight to the floor, he's sticky. He's tricky down there. He sets you up. He knows what he's doing. And RDR, whether you like it or not, his striking has improved. I'm not saying it's improved leaps and bounds, but it has gotten a little bit better since coming over to the UFC. This guy knows what he's in for against Robert Whittaker, and I believe that RDR, at some point in this fight, is able to get into the clinch. He's able to land those knees because you know he's going to be confident with him after what he did to Bo Nickel. Now, again, Robert Whittaker and Bo Nickel, it's not even close to on the competition there. Robert Whittaker's way better than Bo Nickel, obviously. But utilize a similar game plan. Get in his face, make him feel your presence, and get to the grappling. Get to the clinch. Wear on Robert Whittaker, take him down, throw him off balance, because Robert Whittaker, if he keeps his fight on the feet, he is going to dominate RDR. We all know that, I feel, right? But it's the ground game of RDR, man. I think outside of Khamzat Chimaev in this weight class, this guy, while he hasn't fought the competition that Rob has thus far in the UFC, there's something to be said about his skills. There's something to be said about his skills. He does grappling competitions as well. Those 2 losses were against a giant individual with crazy power. We've seen RDR get tagged in the past in other fights, so I don't really like that, right? Because if he gets hit by Robert Whittaker, it's going to be a different ball game. And this is a huge step up here. but with the momentum, given he's 34 years of age, he's not just some new kid on the block here. This is a guy with a lot of fight experience, a good camp behind him. I think RDR will be prepared for this. I think he applies smart pressure, imposes his size on Robert Whittaker, and in about the third round, we see him get Rob down, and he catches Rob in a scramble with some sort of submission, because we know RDR, like I said, he's sticky on the ground. He sets you up. He's playing, high-level chess down there, and as good of a grappler as Robert Whittaker is, if he makes any mistakes in some of these grappling exchanges, I see Reinier capitalizing and taking advantage. But if you guys enjoyed this video, do me a favor, please give it a like. Let me know who you're picking to win this fight down in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss an upload. I would greatly appreciate it. See you next time.